Ask Reddit. What fan theories have blown your mind with their devastating logic? Part 1. I read a theory about Courage, the cowardly dog, that said Courage is actually a normal dog and he sees the world through a dog's eyes. All the villains in the show are just normal people, but to a little dog they seem scary. They don't actually live in the middle of nowhere, but since his owners are too old to take him outside for walks, he only knows what's around his immediate property, and everything beyond that is nothing because he's never seen it. This is a good theory. Also explains why Courage always feels like he has to protect his owners from all the scary things, even though the owners are very nonchalant about all of the situations, and act like everything is normal, and Courage is freaking out for apparently no reason. Reading about Rugrats makes me think of that episode where they think the world will end. They make a shelter and plan to survive, except there's only enough room for 4, not 5. So they have to pick between Tommy, Chucky, Angelica, Phil, and Lil. They actually make a logical choice for repopulating the earth. You would take both girls. Chucky has different family from either girl, so he's accepted. The choice would be between Tommy and Phil. Phil has redundant DNA with Lil. Tommy, while a cousin of Angelica, still brings more diversity. Leaving Phil out was the logical choice, and if they truly had to. It's not broken down this way in the show, but they still reach the same result. Forcing little kids to choose who dies is pretty disturbing premise for a children's show. That's what made the 90s memorable. The story of Aladdin is made up by the salesman at the beginning to persuade you to buy the lamp. This seems far more plausible than it being 10,000 years in the future. Doctor Who. The Doctor's name is a word of power, something that was introduced to the series in Moffat's Series 3 episode, The Shakespeare Code. What does the Doctor's name do? It unlocks the Time War. This is the reason he trusts no one but himself to know his own name. During the ending of Forest of the Dead, the 10th Doctor also states to River that there would be only one way she could have known his name. This is also the reason why the Silents are terrified of the Doctor's name. And why not? It would release the Daleks and the Time Lord from the locked Time War. It's speculated that this is the premise of the 50th anniversary episode. There's one hole. If his name is a word of power, how come he didn't use his name before the Time War? In the classic series, he was still called the Doctor, even though Time War has yet to happen. He's a time traveler. He sees time differently than us. There is no before for him. A bit late for this, but Willy Wonka knew those children would die in his factory. After Augustus gets sucked up the chute, they all hop on board the boat through the Tunnel of Doom. The boat doesn't have 2 extra vacant seats, though. It was designed with prior knowledge that they would lose 2 participants before that point. Later, they drive a cream-spewing car with only 4 seats. Did they have another car waiting in the garage in case the others made it? Of course not. Willy Wonka uses children to make candy. I've always thought Willy Wonka had amazing potential to be incredibly sinister. He's just being condescending these days, though. I like the idea that at the end of The Thing, 1982, when Kurt Russell offers Keith David the bottle and he drinks out of it. The bottle is filled with gasoline, one from the Molotovs he was throwing earlier. Since the creature wouldn't understand what gasoline tastes like, it wouldn't spit it out. Another theory I've heard is that McGrady gave him the alcohol knowing that if Childs were human, he would be fearful of being infected and refuse the alcohol. By drinking it, Childs shows that he isn't afraid of infection and must therefore be a thing. The original Scooby-Doo is set after a horrible economic depression. Everything is abandoned and falling apart, and all of the villains are people who would normally be really respected, professors, museum curators, celebrities, who have fallen into hard times just like everyone else. How many times have the gang helped someone not go out of business? The Venture Bros had a nice twist on this. Fred was an insane cult dealer. Shaggy had gone so far around the bend he was imagining his dog was talking to him. Easily the darkest Venture episode. Fred is Ted Bundy, Daphne is Patty Hearst, Velma is the radical feminist Valerie Solanas, and Shaggy is the son of Sam Killer, who claimed he heard dogs commanding him to kill. Fun fact, this episode was one of the few not written by Doc Hammer and Jackson Public. It was written by Ben Udland, creator of The Tick. Edlund has co-writing credit on a handful of episodes, but otherwise, the cohesive feel of the show largely has the limited number of writers to thank. My favorite Star Wars conspiracy is that Emperor wasn't spending all those resources creating crazy super weapons like the Death Star and the Sun Crusher and putting together gigantic fleets of Star Destroyers wasn't to stop the Rebel Alliance, but rather in preparation of the Yuuzhan Vong invasion that would happen about a quarter century after Roe TJ ended. Now the Emperor is a pretty smart guy. I mean, he got himself elected to Chancellor of the Republic, started a war, earned himself absolute control on both sides of the war, then managed to turn the galaxy against the guys who, for a millennium, had served as icons of peacekeeping, justice, and democracy. And that takes some serious strategizing. But here's the thing. At this point, the Republic was falling apart, with or without a Sith-led separatist movement to nudge them in the wrong direction. The Senate was where nothing ever got done. Corruption reigned supreme. Even the Jedi Council wasn't doing its job properly. Ideally, Jedi are supposed to act as bastions of compassion and moderation. The way the Jedi would be tasked to deal with the situation is as balancing influence between, say, two conflicting nation-states, or a particularly quarrelsome trade agreement. Everyone respected and would listen to a Jedi, and even without acting on behalf of the Republic, they should be able to arrive on a scene and be able to allow discussion and bureaucracy to flourish. Instead, the Jedi Council of the warning days of the Republic had grown inward and conservative, spending all their time mediating on the state of the galaxy and not enough time heading out there and fixing crap. This held throughout the war, when Jedi were surprisingly quick to jump to open combat as opposed to discussion. In short, the Republic was completely and utterly unprepared for a real invasion, from a force that wasn't being controlled by a puppet master who was preventing either side from gaining an advantage until the moment was right. The kinds of fleets that were commonplace in the Empire would have been impossible for the Republic to even agree to create, let alone have the wherewithal to actually build. What Palpatine did was take a failing system and tear it out by the roots, replacing it with a brutally efficient military-industrial focused society, one that could adequately prepare for an invasion of the scale of Yuuzhan Vong were already beginning. Second of all, if you think about it, creating a weapon that can destroy planets doesn't make a whole lot of sense when you're fighting a war against a well-funded but decentralized and scattered rebellion. The Rebel Alliance wasn't fighting a war of planets or borders or resources, they were fighting a war of attrition. What good is the ability to destroy a planet when your enemy doesn't even officially control any? The destruction of Alderaan, the only notable use of the Death Star, was a move made by Grand Moff Tarkin, whose Tarkin doctrine, though it heavily influenced the way the Empire kept a tight grip on even the furthest systems, was not the ultimate purpose of the ultimate weapon. Tarkin was convinced that the Death Star was his tool, one of intimidation and despotism. Then he could use it to keep the Alliance, the biggest threat to his power, at bay. And we all know how that venture turned out. No, the real purpose of the Death Star was to be able to fight a force that could completely terraform an entire planet into a gigantic, organic shipyard in a matter of months, and was backed by dozens of 100-plus kilometer across world ships. In fact, without the timely arrival of the seed of the original Yuuzhan Vong homeworld, Zonoma Seacoast, and a Jedi-influenced heretic cult that spurred a slave uprising, it's very unlikely that the Denzians of the galaxy could have survived the war at all under the leadership of the New Republic. In fact, it's not really even fair to say that they won the war in any sense. With a sizable portion of the population of the galaxy eradicated, Coruscant, the former shining jewel at the heart of every major government for millennia, captured and terraformed beyond recognition, and the New Republic forced to reconstruct itself as the Galactic Alliance. Undoubtedly, for all its flaws, the Empire could have hammered out a far less Pyrrhic victory over the Vong. And if Palpatine hadn't underestimated the abilities of both the Rebellion he never considered a comparable threat, and one young Jedi, perhaps the galaxy could have avoided the deaths of uncountable sentients during the Yuzhan Vong War years later. Skynet and the way it operates never really made sense to me. Why doesn't it crush humanity? Until I decided that in the Terminator universe, Skynet is mentally ill, codependent, and in denial about its true actions, motives, and goals. Allow me to explain. I remember seeing once on a 2020 or a Dateline, a journalist, maybe John Stossel, touring an old, abandoned, circa 1950s Russian bioweapon manufacturing facility. It was little more than a concrete skeleton, even the walls were mostly gone. What remained were 3 or 4 floors and staircases connecting them. In the floors, going all the way up, were huge holes. They were meant to hold fermentation vats, at least 25 feet in diameter and 4 stories tall, each. There was room for at least 8 vats. They were for fermenting and cultivating anthrax or smallpox by the millions of gallons. Think about that. And that was done with 1950s era tech. And that was just one plant. The tech was simple in the extreme. If Skynet really wanted to wipe out humanity, what is with the Terminators at all? Why send out endoskeletons and Terminators armed with weapons that can't be captured and used by humans, and who are also themselves vulnerable to capture and reprogramming? How many humans can one Terminator seriously kill over its useful lifetime?